Senator, welcome back to the program here. The Operation Double Nickel caught everyone off guard. I mean, I'm not too far from this age myself, so it looks appealing here. How much support do you think there is actually going to be for this?
I think Operation Double Nickel, is going to do really well. And I think it's based upon a lot of good policy changes that we've made. See, just in the last election, we've had another great vote by the public to increase homestead exemption and to really push the over 65 exemption. And I have been everywhere across the state, and I get thanked by over 65 homeowners because they've saved 1,000. They're paying no school tax at all. They're just like astonished. And Lieutenant Governor Patrick said, well, why don't we extend this from 65 down to 55? Great idea. And I threw in the double nickel because I think it's an easy way to explain to the public what it means.
My question for all these, I mean, who doesn't enjoy this? But my question is, can Texas sustain this financially? What happens in those dry times when revenue growth slows?
Well, this is very economical. Homestead exemptions are by far, far more efficient. And I think Lieutenant Governor Patrick in his press conference talked about, if you could take $1 billion or $10 billion and throw it at homesteads or throw it at compression, then homesteads are over 4 times more efficient. So in this particular package, we're looking at about $3.7 billion, and about a third of that, about 1.3, is for the double nickel portion of it, for the bringing those great senior benefits down to age 55.
Yeah.
And that's important because our entire projected cash reserve was about 4.6 billion. That's almost gone. In fact, it is between Medicaid and the education department. And so as long as we keep doing bite-sized chunks, then good things happen, because the upside of this is pretty astonishing. For everybody's going to get nearly $400 no matter where they are with this package. But the 55 to 65s plus are going to get $950. But wait, we're not done yet. That's just what they save on their homestead. And when we do more, their values, like over 65s to the 55s, are going to go down, which means they pay less. So we're calculating $16,000 in change for the first decade with the double nickel plan for 3.3 million homeowners. It's transformative. And the great news, it's affordable because we're looking at staying within our budget boundaries for the future.
But those budget boundaries are projected budget boundaries, aren't they? I mean, if things get bad in a few years, I don't want to go back to the 80s oil bust in Houston, but if things get bad, can the state government still afford to give homeowners this break?
Right. That's why going to the public and getting these 78, 79, 83%, 86% positive votes on these propositions that I've been offering.
Yeah.
With in some cases passed unanimously by both houses is so important. These type of homestead exemptions changes are affordable, and especially when you look at both the combination are about 3.7 billion. And remember, that's a 2-year biennium, so we're really talking about less than $2 billion a year. So that's why it's affordable. You have to think, because you hear a lot of numbers, but you have to just reduce them down to we're going to live within our means. And once it's enshrined in the Constitution, it becomes a priority.
I was talking to a county judge today up in the Panhandle, and she was talking about the concern that I've heard from other local officials that if these exemptions continue to rise for homeowners, that local cities and counties are going to be pinched for revenue. What do you tell them?
Well, she's misinformed because this is for school taxes only. See, that's the important. See, everybody's got an opinion. Jason, it doesn't matter if the opinion's right or wrong. It's not even based on fact. In this particular case, she's talking about her stuff.
Sure.
Which she can, and her commissioner's court can make those decisions. We're talking about the school taxes. And even just by the school tax portion of the bill, we're looking at nearly $1,000 savings for those over 55, and about 16,000 savings over a decade, just for the school portion only.
2026 might be challenging for Republicans. That's no secret at all. But what are the chances, do you think, the governor might call a special session to take up something like this before
Jason,
next year's elections?
I've said this so many times on this program. I never try to even speak for the governor. I try to speak for Senator Bettencourt. Now, go back to your premise, however. The premise is important. 2026, yes, is going to be a challenging year for Republicans. All the facts point to the historical record of midterm elections being an issue for the party in power. You can just look at what's happened with the shutdown, because that affected consumer confidence so heavily, which is one of the reasons why over half the bond issues failed. The other reason is that we had a bill that said this is a tax increase. That was mine, and that was for people to look in when they walked into the ballot, they knew they were voting on a tax increase. So we just have to recognize the obvious in what we do, that from a partisan perspective, yes, there's no question that a mid-year election is going to be an issue for the party in power, and that is, from a national viewpoint, clearly the Republican Party.
But you're not expecting the legislature might come in the interim, though, huh?
Well, there's a lot to do here. See, part of this is these type of proposals generally would be more something that you would hear before legislative session, as before you're going into political primaries. And like everything at this point in time, the entire political calculus and clock has been accelerated because of all the activity that goes on with this. So we're seeing stuff earlier, quicker, faster, maybe not better, because people are just scrolling from headline to headline now than we used to. But we've got, enormous elections that we're headed into. We've got political primaries for not only legislature, but for statewide offices. We've got clearly what's going to be contested races in both party primaries for the U.S. Senate, which is going to lead the ticket. So that's going to be a blockbuster race in 2026, no matter how it turns out. So there's a lot of activity that goes through an election year. That's generally why, over historically, we've had legislative sessions in off election years.
Gotcha. So we've seen this plan from the lieutenant governor. Governor Abbott said he wants to get rid of school property taxes altogether, though. Can Texas afford to do that?
Look, I'm here to talk about the double nickel, but I'll make a sidebar comment about all this. All of this is money, okay? It's a question of how much money you have. Now, to your earlier point, when we had the record property tax relief package for the country in 2023, we thought it was $18 billion. There were two mistakes that were in the calculus, one by TEA, the other one by LBB. That package, when we got back to the regular session, cost us $22.7 billion. Now, with all of this, you have to make sure what you're doing you can pay for, and that you can look for it over time. Now, let me step back, because Lieutenant Governor covered this, I think, pretty well in his press conference. There's always people that say, hey, you can do away with all property taxes. Well, I think everybody agrees now that would take over $86 billion a year, and that's $192 billion a biennium. That wipes out the state's discretionary budget. But more importantly, if you shifted that to sales tax, it's about a 25% sales tax on the existing items we tax.
Sure.
And that would blow apart the working class, middle class, and probably even the lower upper class. So that looks like that's something that we've always talked about on this program. And again, Lieutenant Governor Patrick did, because you hear this, oh, it's real easy. It takes a point or two. It's not. It's real money. And to replace all school taxes, it's $42 million a year times two, $1 billion a year times two. It's $84 billion, and that would take a 15% sales tax. So these are real dollars. And I think everybody, I think, in both the governor and lieutenant governor statements, they're looking to try to do as much as they can. And it's just a question of how many tens of billions of dollars you have to throw at the problem, because that's what it takes to solve these problems in macro.
In macro being the key word there. One more question.
Yeah,
for you on this.
like I would actually say like in huge macro, but I don't want to make it a partisan comment.
No worries. Well, let me ask you this last thing. Critics argue the homestead exemptions only benefit homeowners. They have a point there, because homeowners like myself, like you, we're getting the benefit from these. People who are renting are not getting the benefit. Do you expect the legislature to try to take up any benefits at all for renters?
We already have. See,
did that pass last session? I thought that didn't pass.
Well, no, we did. It's called rate compression. See, we've had tremendous success with cutting property taxes. We've cut the tax rate for schools on M&O by 37.5% since 2019.
But isn't that up to, you're counting on trickle down though for landlords to give the savings to the renters though, aren't you?
Well, you have to, because in a slow economic time, they'll definitely send it because they're losing renters and they need to attract them. Okay. Now, look, any other form of that becomes price controls, and that has failed in New York City and San Francisco and Chicago, any place where the leftist progressives, or even, President Nixon tried it in the early 1970s and price controls flunked. Okay. So you have to understand that we're helping everybody, all businesses, all homes, everybody's getting that rate compression. And the other thing that's not happening, because this is the latest rumor, the younger generation is not paying for the older generation's tax cuts. The state budget buys it down for schools and nobody else pays for it. That's why it's a cut. So we want to encourage home ownership, and that's part of housing affordability. And we've had a whole bunch of bills pass on housing affordability. We've talked about them in the past. It's really important concept because the average homeowner age is 58. So when we take the double nickel and bill, which I think is a great plan, we drop that senior benefit down to 55, which, by the way, surviving spouses already get. There's precedent for it. That's over half of the homeowners are going to be on autopilot. They won't have to worry about their appraisals anymore on their homes. They're going to see their bills go down by $1,000 or close to it, and they go down forever. And that's a huge impact into the economy. And the fact that everybody else gets more too, including the businesses, because they get rate compression.
Right.
So this is a win-win. As long as we're working on school taxes, we're not shifting it. We're not shifting to other people, and we're helping, quite frankly, massively, because there's no other state in the union, Jason, no other state in the union that's cut their tax rate by 37% on schools in 6 years. We've fallen. When we started the sleigh ride, and Lieutenant Governor Patrick put me out on the road last decade to convince people that the taxing units had to cut the rate because otherwise they weren't cutting their taxes. We were the third highest in a state in the union on property tax rates. We were chasing New Jersey and Illinois into oblivion, and we've now fallen to 10th because we cut the rate and raised homestead exemptions. And I think that's the best Texas two-step you can get. And Operation Double Nickel is a very economic way to bring millions of more people into these great cuts that we can afford in our budget long term.
Senator, we appreciate the time as always. Thank you.
No, thank you.